Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into some tricky territory. We're looking at those economic questions where the usual logic just doesn't seem to fit.
Exactly. Like, what happens when market thinking bumps up against things we feel are, well, priceless or sacred, maybe? Things you just can't put a number on.
Yeah, the invaluable stuff. We're kind of probing the edges of economics and ethics here.
We are. And our main guide for this is actually a really fascinating exchange. It's a 1997 review by the economist Kenneth J. Nobel laureate looking at Margaret Jane Radin's work, Contested Commodities. She's coming from a legal perspective.
Okay, so law meets economics. And our goal here, what are we trying to figure out?
Well, the aim is really to understand what's actually being contested in contested commodities. It goes beyond just, haggling over price.
Right.
We want to trace back some of that skepticism about markets historically, and maybe more importantly, dig into this idea of personhood, our sense of self, and see how it gets challenged when things become commodities.
Makes sense. So where do we start? With the history.
I think we have to. This pushback against market thinking, it's really old. Arrow points out that people have worried for ages that economics, just by trying to quantify things, kind of misses the point, ignores the deeper meaning in life.
You can definitely feel that tension way back, even during the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution. Those alarm bells were ringing pretty loudly.
They were.
I'm thinking of Edmund Burke, After the French Revolution, 1790, he has that incredibly bleak quote.
Oh yeah, the famous one.
The age of chivalry is gone. The age of sophists, economists, and calculators is upon us, and the glory of Europe is extinguished forever.
Wow. Talk about dramatic.
But it paints this picture, doesn't it? The economist is the cold, calculating villain draining all the soul out of everything.
And it wasn't just some abstract philosophical worry. It felt very social, too.
Definitely. Fast forward a few decades, industrialization is ramping up, and Thomas Carlyle warns that this whole laissez-faire thing is just ripping society apart. Right, his warning, which pops up in the source material, it really echoes, doesn't it? That human relationships can't just be about cash payment alone.
Exactly. That phrase captures it perfectly. This horror at reducing everything, every connection, every interaction to just a transaction.
And that specific idea, cash payment alone, it became really central for communist thinkers, right?
Absolutely foundational. Marx and Engels really leaned into that. They argued the bourgeoisie, the rising capitalist class, had basically stripped away all human connection except for naked self-interest, that callous cash payment.
And they saw it spreading everywhere, not just factories.
No. They were quite specific. They claimed the market had turned respected figures, the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science, into nothing more than paid wage laborers.
That shift from having a calling, a vocation, to just getting a paycheck, you still hear echoes of that exact complaint today, I think.
You really do. It's that feeling, isn't it? That the inherent worth of something, the service or the skill, gets boiled down to just its exchange value. Fungible, replaceable.
And John Ruskin, another big voice from that era, he took this argument about labor itself even further.
Yeah, Ruskin really went for it. He argued labor itself is priceless.
Priceless. How did he frame that?
Well, around 1863, he basically called the whole idea of labor being a commodity the alpha and omega of Politico-Economic fallacy, like the biggest mistake possible.
It's wrong words.
His point was sort of philosophical. He said, look, everything else might be bought and sold using labor, but labor itself, human energy, creativity, you can't actually buy that. It's the source, not an object for sale.
That's a really deep moral rejection of the whole market system for labor.
It is. But, and this is important, Arrow brings up a really uncomfortable historical detail here. It shows that just being anti-market doesn't automatically put you on higher moral ground.
Uh-oh. What's the catch?
Well, it's pretty jarring. The source points out that both Carlyle and Ruskin, these guys railing against the dehumanizing market, they actually defended slavery at different points.
Wait, seriously? Defended slavery while attacking the market for dehumanizing people? How does that even compute?
It's complex and disturbing. It seems they preferred the older hierarchical system, the sort of paternalistic bond of servitude, however awful, to what they saw as the cold, impersonal cash transaction of wage labor.
So a known structured hierarchy, even a brutal one, felt less bad to them than the everyone for themselves market.
Apparently so. It's a really stark reminder that trying to shield human relations from market logic can lead you down some very dark paths. The ethics are just incredibly tangled.
Okay, so that's the 19th century focused on how markets mess up social relationships. But then we jump to the late 20th century. To Margaret Jane Radin. You said her focus shifts more towards the individual.
That's right. Radin's concern isn't so much about the overall social fabric, though that's related. It's more about the individual's psychological and moral integrity. She worries when things crucial to our personal identity, our core sense of self, get pulled into the market's orbit.
Right, this concept she calls personhood.
Yes. Her main target is how market thinking can erode that sense of self.
Okay, so let's really try to nail down what she means by personhood.
For Radin, personhood needs integrity and continuity of the self required for individuation. Basically, what makes you you, a distinct and whole person.
And to protect that, she maps things out on a kind of spectrum.
Exactly. On one end, you've got what she calls personal property. This is stuff that's deeply bound up with the self. Think, I don't know, wedding rings, maybe diaries, things so tied to your identity they become incommensurable. You can't just put a price on them.
Okay, makes sense. Like my lucky coffee mug. Not really worth anything, but irreplaceable to me.
Precisely. And then on the other extreme, you have fungible property.
Interchangeable stuff.
Yeah, stuff that doesn't define who you are, money, commodities like oil, widgets off an assembly line, totally replaceable, easily priced, commensurable.
But most things aren't purely one or the other.
Right. Most things land somewhere in between. And this is where her idea of incomplete commodification comes in. It's the messy middle ground.
So this is where we kind of accept buying and selling happens, but maybe we put rules around it, like guardrails.
That's it, exactly. Think about things like housing or employment.
Yeah.
Society generally agrees these things involve transactions, buying and selling. But we don't just leave it totally to the free market, do we?
No, we have minimum wage laws, workplace safety rules, landlord-tenant laws, zoning.
Precisely. All those regulations are society saying, okay, this can be partly a commodity, but not completely. It's an acknowledgement that these things touch on fundamental human needs, shelter, safety, livelihood things tied to our well-being, and arguably our personhood. So we regulate. It's incompletely commodified.
Okay, that framework makes sense, but it leads her into this really difficult situation, doesn't it? What she calls the double bind.
Ah, yes, the double bind. That's where the theory meets a really harsh reality. It highlights the tension between, on one hand, wanting to protect this abstract idea of personhood, and on the other, dealing with the immediate, often desperate needs of people in poverty.
Right. It's a real policy nightmare.
It is. Take your example of banning what she calls desperate exchanges, like, say, selling a kidney. Should we ban that completely because we believe the human body is fundamental to personhood and shouldn't be for sale? That's one side of the dilemma. Protect the principle.
But the flip side, banning it stops someone who's maybe in dire straits, facing ruin, from using potentially the only valuable thing they have to improve their situation.
That's the other horn of the dilemma, exactly. Radin points out that a total ban, while it might feel morally right in principle, might actually be unjust in practice if it condemns the poorest people to stay poor. You remove their last option.
So the law, trying to uphold an ideal, could end up hurting the very people it might claim to protect. It's like moral quicksand.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Applying these personhood protections isn't straightforward at all when real lives and livelihoods are on the line.
Okay, before we get into how just the language of markets might be a problem, you mentioned there's a key disagreement, Arrow points out, between Raven's legal view and how economists actually think.
Yes, this is really important for understanding the whole debate, because they sometimes talk past each other. Radin often seems to assume that commodification means everything gets reduced to money terms. You know, value just becomes the one with the higher price tag.
And economists don't actually think that way.
Not necessarily, no. Arrow clarifies this. In economic theory, being able to compare things, commensurability, is usually represented by a utility function, or just a preference ranking. You prefer A over B. That's all it means. Crucially, this ranking, this ability to prefer A to B, doesn't require you to put a dollar value on A or B. The utility itself doesn't have to be measured in money.
Okay, so give me an example.
All right, think about the extreme example, selling a child. Arrow points out that the statement, parents would not sell their child at any price, is perfectly consistent with standard economic theory.
How?
Because the parents simply rank the child's presence in their lives infinitely higher than any amount of money. The preference, child dollar, exists within the economic framework, even though one side has no price. The economist isn't automatically trying to monetize your kid.
Okay, that really reframes things. The conflict isn't necessarily that economists think money can buy everything. It's more about whether different kinds of goods, like money and children, can even be compared on the same scale of preference.
Exactly. And this connects to a really interesting technical point Arrow raises about bounded utility.
Bounded utility. Sounds complex.
It's a bit technical, but the idea is powerful. Arrow uses the example of studies looking at risk of death. How much extra pay do people need to accept a job with a slightly higher risk? Governments use this for cost-benefit analysis sometimes.
Right. People do accept some risk for money. Construction workers, miners.
They do, for a small increase in risk.
Yeah.
But here's the key. The trade-off doesn't just keep going up forever.
Right.
Meaning, Arrow notes, when the probability of death gets sufficiently high, no price is sufficient for the risk to be undertaken. There comes a point where no amount of money is worth it.
Okay.
And the crucial insight is that this fact that life effectively becomes priceless beyond a certain risk level isn't some violation of economic theory. It's actually a consequence of standard theory if you assume utility functions are bounded, meaning they don't go up infinitely.
So the math itself, done right, shows that some things are literally priceless, infinite value compared to money.
In essence, yes. So economists using standard tools can, and often do, reach the conclusion that some things are beyond monetary value.
Wow, okay. That's a really strong counterpoint to the idea that economics inherently cheapens everything. But
Yeah.
this brings us back to Radin's other big argument, doesn't it? Even if the math works out, maybe just talking about things in market terms is the problem, the discourse itself.
Exactly. This is Retlan's second major point. She argues that even if you don't literally create a market, just using the language of commodities, the rhetoric of buying and selling as a way to analyze things can still be a threat to personhood.
And this is aimed at, well, academics, right? Like economists and legal scholars applying market logic to non-market areas.
Precisely. Think about people like Gary Becker or Richard Posner using economic analysis for marriage, family, even crime. Radin was particularly concerned about things like Posner comparing rape to a kind of theft of bodily integrity.
Okay, I can see why that would be controversial. Even if the legal outcome is right, the language feels wrong.
That's Radin's worry, that this kind of transactional language might subtly change how we view the act itself, devaluing the human cost, the moral dimension. Even if the analysis reaches a conclusion we agree with, the rhetoric itself might corrode our values.
It's the idea that the way we talk about something changes how we feel about it, maybe even how we act. It corrupts the meaning.
Yes. And there's a classic real-world study that gets right at this. Richard Titmus's work on blood donation back in 1970.
Ah, the blood donation case. Refresh my memory on that.
Okay, so in the U.S. at the time, you could both donate blood voluntarily or sell it commercially. In Great Britain, it was almost entirely voluntary donation.
Right.
Titmus argued that the mere existence of the commercial option in the U.S. actually damaged the whole system. It would depreciate the altruistic meaning of giving.
How so?
Because if you can sell your blood, then choosing to donate it isn't just a pure gift anymore. It's also implicitly choosing not to earn money. The market option contaminates the altruistic one, makes the gift feel, well, cheaper, less special.
So the market doesn't even need to be the main way things happen. Just having it there as an option changes the social meaning of the non-market way.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
And you see this logic applied most intensely when we talk about things like baby selling, which is thankfully banned everywhere.
Yeah, that's a clear line for society. But Arrow points out an economist could make an efficiency argument there, couldn't they?
Oh, easily. Arrow says, any economics student could probably sketch out why a market for babies might be efficient in purely economic terms, matching babies with parents who value them most highly, measured by willingness and ability to pay. But obviously, we find that repugnant.
And Radin's explanation for why we ban it would focus on, what? The mother's altruism being spoiled? Or the baby's personhood?
She kind of touches on both. Is it that putting a price compromises the mother's gift? Or is it that pricing the baby itself violates the baby's inherent status as a person? But Arrow actually steps in with a different, maybe sharper take on why we ban baby selling.
What's his perspective?
Arrow suggests we shift the focus completely. It's not really about the transaction between the adults. The crucial thing, he argues, is the right of the child to be nurtured.
Ah, so it's about the child's needs and rights, not the parent's feelings or the act of selling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A child isn't property. They can't protect their own interests. They need a guardian, a trustee, someone obligated to care for them. That relationship, trustee and beneficiary, is fundamentally different from owner and property.
That's a powerful distinction. It anchors the ban not in preventing a distasteful transaction, but in upholding a specific kind of protective, non-ownership relationship essential for a human being.
It really does. It moves the conversation from individual psychology or market taint to the necessary structures for human flourishing.
Okay, so pulling this all together, Radin seems right that something vital gets lost if market language becomes the only way we talk about human life.
Yes, Arrow seems to agree with that conclusion. But he adds a crucial layer of complexity. Rejecting the market isn't the end of the story because the market isn't the only game in town when it comes to controlling things.
Right, it's not the only big impersonal system we live under.
That's Arrow's final big takeaway. He talks about the multiplicity of control systems. The market is one. But the polity government, law, the state bureaucracy, that's another major one.
And both of these systems can be impersonal. Both can potentially clash with our sense of morality or personhood.
Absolutely. Think about all the things that are contested and kept out of the market, not just for individual reasons, but because selling them would screw up the social system.
Like what? Votes.
Votes are a perfect example. Or judicial decisions. Can you imagine selling court rulings? Or government permits? The whole system of democracy or justice collapses if those things become commodities.
So society decides certain things must be handled by the state, by law, not by the market, to keep the system working.
Right. But, and this is the key point, just because the state controls something doesn't automatically make it ethically sound or protective of individuals. Government control brings its own set of problems. Potential for corruption, political manipulation, bureaucratic indifference, inefficiency, loss of freedom.
So it's like we're caught between two imperfect systems. The market risks turning everything into a commodity, potentially dehumanizing us.
And the state risks controlling everything through political power, potentially oppressing us or getting corrupted.
Neither one is a guaranteed path to protecting human dignity.
That's the reality. The world we live in is this constant negotiation, this messy mix of different control systems, none of them perfect. Arrow leaves us really wrestling with the limits of both the market and the state.
Which leads perfectly into that final thought we wanted to leave everyone with. Maybe the provocative idea is this. Turning something over to the government, politicizing it, isn't necessarily any better at preserving human dignity or individuation than commodifying it is.
It's not automatically safer, no. We have to analyze each situation. Which system, market, state, maybe something else entirely is actually best suited to handle this particular thing while upholding its inherent value, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And how do we limit the downsides of that chosen system?
The question isn't just, should this be for sale?
No. It's maybe, what's the least bad way to manage this given the alternatives? And how do we build in safeguards against abuse, whether it's market abuse or state abuse?
That is definitely something to chew on. A really challenging thought. Thanks for walking us through that.
My pleasure. It's complex stuff.
It certainly is. Thank you all for diving deep with us today.